So a couple of days ago, CLG made an announcement about some roster changes that were going to be made to their team, or at least additions were being made to their team, right? They were obviously in the market for new players after the departure of Tarek and JDM, and the fact that PETA was no longer around either to stand in, and he wasn't going to be coaching anymore. So we knew that there were going to be changes to the team, but when those changes took place, I was already doing videos about Valve's coaching ruling for CSGO, as well as the video I did about Automatic Joy and Cloud9. And so I didn't really get a chance to jump on the CLG roster move as soon as it happened with the video, but I wanted to kind of rewind a little bit and go back to this now and just talk a little bit about this move and what it means for CLG going forward, because basically CLG is now a brand new team. Almost anything you knew about this team prior to what they are now is almost irrelevant. Of course, we will look at what they did before and compare it to what they do going forward and judge whether or not they made good moves or bad moves. Of course that will happen, but my point is that you can't look at a result that they've had recently and expect them to have similar form or you know, similar map pool or what have you as they had before. It's basically a brand spanking new team across the board, despite the fact that there's two members on this team that have been with CLG since its conception and even going back into the Mouse Spaz days. Even though those two players are still there, they now play completely different roles than what they had through most of their time on the team, at least while they were representing CLG. Obviously, Kusta has been on the team for a few months, but, you know, even he hasn't really played much with this team, right? I mean, pretty much the only thing that he has done with this team would be basically ESL 1 Cologne, where they, you know, O2'd in groups, and then he played with them a bit during the E-League LCQ in that phase series. So, I mean, even he hasn't really been around that long, though I guess he is not as recent of a pickup as the two new players that they just signed. So when you look at all of that, this is a brand new CLG. You know, it almost resembles nothing of what they were before, right? And so I guess first I'll just talk about the two new additions really quickly, and then I'll talk a little bit about, you know, how they're set up going forward. So we'll start off with Ethan, who is one of the players that was signed to the team. He was actually going to be playing with E United for this season of ESL Pro League, but he was pretty much snatched up by CLG before the season even started. Prior to that, he was playing Premier for a team called Prospects. He played the entire last season with them, and that was his first full season of league play outside of Open. He had played like a full season of Open in the past. He had played a couple of matches here and there in Premier, but this Prospects team he played with last season of ESEA Premier was really the first time that he had played a full season. And he looked quite good in the regular season of Premier. I mean, when he was playing up against teams like Echo Fox and TK on an individual basis, he played pretty well, despite the fact that his team lost to those two teams. That was really the only two teams in Premier that most people would really know off the top of their head. I mean, there's a couple other teams that have some decent players on them, but those are the two bigger names that played in Premier, as obviously, you know, the Brazilians and Immortals have already, you know, looked on to Pro League. They weren't in Premier anymore. Luminosity, the other Brazilian team that people know, are actually playing in ESEA main. So it's pretty much just Echo Fox and TK that would be recognizable in Premier. However, whenever they played Echo Fox in the playoffs, they actually really struggled, and Ethan was a part of this as well. So when they were starting to face some of the better competition in Premier in a higher pressure environment, it didn't go as well. Now, I will say that Ethan's also pretty well known because he plays a lot of pugs and rank S and such, and, you know, he can usually do pretty good in those. And he's a 16-year-old kid, so he's kind of one of those maybe young talents you take a gamble on because he is obviously highly inexperienced, but he is very young. He does seem to have pretty good aim. He does seem to be trying to develop as a player. He's putting in time, at least playing a lot of rank S pugs and at least trying to hone his skills. And so in a situation where you're CLG and there's really not that many options on the table, I mean, you've lost your 2-star players, you've had to shuffle roles around with the lineup that you still have because certain things weren't working out with people in their initial roles, and, you know, you're thinking about player contracts and buyouts and all this stuff. It does make sense to perhaps take a gamble on one young player. So this 16-year-old guy, Ethan, who hasn't really played at a professional level ever and has only had one season of Premier, you know, it might be worth giving him a shot, I would say. So, I mean, I think he's probably likely worth the gamble given the situation CLG's in. It really doesn't seem like they have many other options, right? So I can understand this move, I guess what I'm saying. Now, when you combine it with the other move, with the pickup of Subroza, then you kind of wonder if you're rolling the dice too much. Like, now you're taking a gamble on two different players, two players who have no professional experience, on top of all the other role swapping that you're doing, and now you're really starting to have a really sticky situation. So let's talk a little bit about Subroza. So Subroza is 19 years old, so a little bit older than Ethan. He recently had been playing main with Ace Gaming, which is a Canadian team. And that team did pretty great in the regular season, but not so great in the playoffs whenever they had to play against the Brazilians in Luminosity. And again, we've never seen Subroza really in top competition outside perhaps playing against this Brazilian team Luminosity that's coming up. He wasn't even able to play in rank S pugs because he wasn't on a team that was eligible to play in that division, so he's not even getting a chance to pug against professional players on a regular basis prior to joining CLG. So Subroza is an even bigger gamble than Ethan because he has even less experience than Ethan does and probably has less time up against, you know, somewhat top competition in the NA scene than Ethan does. So he's even a bigger risk. And, you know, as far as LAN plays goes, I don't know if either of these players have really played anything, to be honest. I think Subroza played at DreamHack Montreal with the Ace Gaming team, but that was obviously a much smaller LAN. So maybe these guys had some local LAN experience, some smaller stuff, but nothing on any type of, you know, bigger stage they might get thrusted on. You know, for example, these guys should be playing at Northern Arena in Toronto, where a lot of top North Americans will be there. So this is going to be kind of where they get their feet wet, I suppose. I don't even know how much time they're going to get to practice and prep. They've only played one match since putting this team together, which was against Optic, I believe, in the Starlighter Season 2 qualifiers, where they pretty much got blasted, if I remember correctly. And then I also heard something on social media about how one of them was going back home for like a quick vacation. And so they're really not going to get that much time to practice with this team before they even go to Northern Arena 2016. So I think that's going to be kind of like a trial by fire situation where they're not even going to have, you know, a whole hell of a lot of time to put in work to be ready to compete, in my opinion. So that's going to be definitely something to think about. Like, we'll get an initial look at them basically at that Atlanta event, but we won't really probably get something that's really like too concrete to grasp onto, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. Just trying to do a really quick, make sure I didn't miss anything here so far. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the only thing they played in was that you know, Optic game where they got crushed pretty hard. Anyway, so moving back on now, we talked about the two players, and so the point that I'm trying to make here is that I think that when you're taking two gambles like this, it's almost like too much. Like, you're almost setting yourself up to have a really hard time accomplishing much. So especially in the short term, it's almost impossible. You know, I can't even really see this team doing anything for like another 3 or 4 months, even if these two players work out, just because everything's so new for this team, and you're taking two big gambles. So I think maybe they could have tried to get at least one more experienced player on the team, and then, yeah, take your gamble on Ethan. But this just seems, I don't know, like maybe going a bit too far with gambling, but we'll see what happens. So now we talked about the two additions to the team. Let's just get back to this point about CLG being a completely new team going forward. So what I mean by this, I already touched on it briefly, but we'll get into more detail here now, is that obviously Hazed is now going to be the in-game leader of the team, and he's been vocal about this in an interview that he did, or a vlog that he did, I can't remember which, but I think he did an interview with Ryu from Selfless, and he was talking about how, you know, he's taking the reins of the team, he's going to put in the time and the effort to lead the team. They did pick up a coach, Garrett, but apparently the way Hayes kind of put it was that, you know, he was going to be the guy, right? And now with the new coaching ruling anyway, it would really be hard for a coach to really help with in-game leadership too much in rounds, you know, no matter what. But apparently Hayes is going to take, you know, the reins, and he's going to be in full control of how the team plays and operates, and what gets called and when, and all that good stuff. You know, that he wants to be, you know, hands-on and in total control. That seemed to be the message he delivered in the interview that I had heard him do with Ryu, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously that's going to be a whole new role for him. He's never really led before, at least not long-term. Maybe there was a brief time where they experimented with him calling a little bit in practice or something way back when. I think there was like a period in time when Finesse was stepping down from leading and Cutler was coming into that role, that maybe they tried Hayes for a little bit in practice or something. I can't remember if that's true or not, but I thought I heard some rumbling about that when I talked to Hayes in an interview I did with him a very long time ago. So this is going to be interesting itself to just see how Hayes handles that, especially when you're giving him two brand new players to work with that he's going to have to try to mold into the team, and you have, you know, two guys in different roles. So that's going to be a test in itself, just to see how he's able to handle those responsibilities, as well as can he keep up with fragging? Because funny enough, CLG was a team that, yes, Tarek and JDM were the 2-star players, but if Hazed had a big game, that's where they seem to have a lot of their success. You know, if he could drop like a big 30 bomb or drop, you know, in the mid to high 20s, you know, that because he was an entry fragger, that obviously made things easier on the team to open things up and have success on the terror side, particularly if he could have a hot game. But it was radically inconsistent when he did, I felt like. So now I wonder, when you add on the in-game leadership aspect, you know, I feel like they need him to be able to entry frag if he's going to still do that role. I'm not sure what the roles are really going to be on this team going forward, because again, we only saw them play one best of 3 since they put this 5 together. So I have no idea what their plans are. The only thing that I know for sure is that he's going to in-game lead, Cutler's going to op, and Kusta's moved to a rifling role. So, but I don't know how they're going to disperse that as far as like who's going to be lurk, who's going to be an entry, all that good stuff. We'll just have to see how that develops over time. So, yeah, he has a lot to handle, and he doesn't have a lot of experience leading. So this will be interesting. Maybe see how much analysts and Garrett can maybe help him with, you know, demo review for, like, self-team analysis after practice or scouting opponents or all that stuff will certainly be a factor as well. Maybe with PETA having been on the team for so long as a coach, maybe it kind of rubbed off on Hazed a bit, and so maybe the system that PETA put into place is something that Hazed can kind of still work with and tweak to how he wants it. Because to be honest, you know, when PETA came on the team and coached them, when I was watching them play, such as at GEC back in February of this year, where they had a pretty good placing there, and they looked pretty impressive. You know, throughout really the first couple of months of this year, we thought they were the best North American team, or at least I did, and I think Thorin did as well, and several others certainly rated them high. And a lot of the reason for that was, yes, the star power JDM's op, and yes, Tarek having the rifling ability, but it was also the system that PETA had put into place. They were playing this more slow, methodical style of play, very default-oriented, very, you know, much like 1-3-1 map control type stuff on Cash with mid control or Mirage with mid control. You know, just those are just a couple of examples, but they really were able to play discipline Counter-Strike by spreading the map, you know, taking some map control and reacting based off of the information they gained or the picks that they were able to get, as well as they had some well-coordinated executes to mix in, you know, mid-round whenever the situation called for it, or maybe even just to change things up with the faster-paced execute in the beginning of a round. So they had a really good mixture of play. They seemed pretty diverse, but they had that foundation, you know, slow, methodical, oriented play. And I thought that was a lot of the reason why they were so successful early in the year, on top of some of the fragging power they had. So can he keep that and work with it would be another thing to think about. Apparently he had learned a lot from PETA, even from what he said in interviews and such, so we'll see how much it sticks, how much he can work with it, how much he can bring his own original ideas into the team, and how successful those ideas are. Let's get off of Hazed now. So now we're talking about Cutler. So now Cutler's going to be the opper for this team, and so far the only time I've really seen him use the op since picking it up recently here was, of course, at E-League against FaZe, where in all actuality, I thought he did pretty decent in the role. I thought he did pretty well. He obviously did op at one time for this team way back in the day when they were still Mouse Spaz, before they had ever picked up JDM the original time. I might be a little bit off on this, but I'm pretty sure I remember this like a long time ago, like back in 2013 or something like that. I remember that he did do some opping. Then, you know, I wasn't really into 1.6, but people tell me that he was a main opper in 1.6 as well. So it's not as if he's never done the role before, but obviously in recent memory, we only really remember him being used as an in-game leader, as well as being like a more supportive or lurker type rifle on the team most of the time. So this is definitely going to be a big role for him. Obviously, like I said, he had 2 really good maps against FaZe and E-League when he did it, on Dust 2 and on Cobblestone, which they actually won the Cobblestone match, and they only lost Dust 2 in a double overtime. And he, like I said, he played quite well in both those games with the op. So we'll see what happens. You know, it's going to be interesting to see if Cutler is going to be effective or not. He's definitely a smart player, so I can definitely see him being good with his positioning and movement. But it'll just be, you know, whether or not he can be assertive and win actual aim duels against other top oppers in the region. You know, we'll just have to see how that plays out over time. Point is I don't necessarily think it's a terrible move. Putting Cutler into an op position, he might be able to be effective there, and this will actually wind up being quite good. But the other thing that goes along with this is the fact that Kusta is no longer opping, and so now Kusta's in a rifling role. And again, Kusta, when he played against FaZe at E-League, right alongside Cutler basically when it came to like top fragging positions. I mean, they were pretty much neck and neck when it came to fragging in their respective roles. So maybe Kusta as a rifler will in fact work out. But it is sort of weird to me that the way he made the name for himself was with the op when he was playing with Enemy, which of course turned into Selfless, when he had those big events at the end of 2015, like the first America's Minor or the RGN Pro series. Like him and Uber had really established themselves at those two events, and then both of them pretty much fell off since then. To be quite honest, like throughout this year, they haven't been nearly as effective when we watched him play. And granted, there was that whole situation with Kusta on Liquid where he kind of got hamstrung at the DreamHack event where Simple took over for him, opping on Cobblestone against Tyloo, even though he actually had a decent map with the op on Dust 2 against Miles Sports earlier in that tournament. But he had other chances as well, like an online play. And even, you know, some of his time with CLG after he got traded, where it still just didn't look good. And he's always been criticized for being too passive and not being willing to take aim duels against other oppers and all this other business. And his confidence just seemed to have gotten shattered. And I don't know if that's because Liquid shattered it, you know, by grilling him for not doing well, or by not, you know, giving him the chance to op, like at that one event, of taking the op away from him there, crushed his confidence. I don't know if he crushed his own confidence by just, you know, not having the mental composure when he wasn't playing well to try to work himself out of the situation and get back to a proper level. I have no idea what the, you know, psychology is there, so to speak, but whatever happened, he decided to give it up to Cutler. Apparently he volunteered it. From what I've heard in interviews, it's not like he got forced to give up the op. Like, I guess he wanted to give it to Cutler and to take a rifling role. So again, now you have to see, how is this dude going to be able to perform with the rifle? You know what I mean? Yeah, we saw that one little thing at E-League against FaZe, but you know, that's just one thing. You know, are you going to be able to carry that level consistently? Because they got crushed by Optic with this new 5, and the only other real match we've seen since the move. So who really knows what's going to happen there? So essentially you have so many question marks on this team. You have the Hazed in-game leader question mark. How is he going to be able to do that role, and how is that going to affect his fragging, and can he really rally the troops here or not? You have Cutler now in an opping role for the first time in a very long time. And how is that going to work? Is this just an experiment? Will they switch back to Kusta opping if this experiment doesn't work out? You know, that's another big question mark there. How effective can Cutler be in this new role? Because if we're honest, he was their most consistent player, I felt like, through much of 2015. And I think he was even a candidate on some other people's short list as a pickup when they were looking for players. Very consistent fragger, looked quite good. Then he took over in-game leadership, and like slowly but surely he began to decline. And even after giving it up when PETA took over leading, he still had kind of a rough year through a lot of the beginning parts of this year. And so now he picked up the op. I don't know if this is like some honeymoon period with a new role where he had this sick play at E-League, and if that'll carry over or not is going to be something to kind of keep an eye on. Obviously, the Kusta question mark now in a rifling role. Again, same story as Cutler. You know, the E-League spurt, but is that a honeymoon thing? And then you have these two new players. Ethan, who is at least had some Premier experience and has played some rank S-Plugs. At least he's kind of been playing against the top mid-A teams. Then you have this Subroza guy who, from what I can tell, has literally never played against any type of real top competition, unless I'm just, you know, horribly ignorant and am like not aware of something. But I've never really heard of him playing against anything big, so that's even another gamble. You're taking two gambles at once, basically. So I guess I'll cut the video now. I don't want to ramble too much, but I did want to address this move just a little bit. You know, like I said, there's a lot of factors in play. This is basically a brand new team. They've taken two gambles on two young players, maybe one too many. I don't mind taking a gamble on one young player, but maybe two is a little bit too much to work through. But only time will tell. So yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please follow and subscribe for more content. Thanks a lot.